This is the Indigenous Awareness Brief. My name is Silas Bird. I'm the Five Wing Community Liaison Officer, and I'll be your narrator for this briefing. The purpose of this briefing is to provide you with some historic information on the three different Indigenous groups in Labrador, and to provide you some current information on the size and locations of those populations, and to provide you some information on comprehensive land claims and on requirements for government departments to fulfill a duty to consult with Indigenous peoples. Both these topics affect how we conduct D&D operations in the area. This brief also fulfills a commitment made by the Canadian federal government in response to recommendations made in 1995 by an independent environmental review panel about the conduct of flying operations in Labrador and Quebec. D&D's interest in increasing awareness of Indigenous people goes back to a federal environmental review process that was conducted between 1986 and 1995. D&D produced an environmental impact statement that outlined the predicted impacts on the environment and on communities, and also outlined D&D's proposal to reduce any negative impacts to the greatest degree possible. That environmental impact statement was reviewed by an independent review panel, and it made recommendations to improve on D&D's proposal. The panel did so by releasing 58 recommendations, one of which recommended that D&D conduct cross-cultural awareness training for all incoming Canadian forces, D&D civilian employees, and allied forces. Turning now to Indigenous peoples in the area. Indigenous peoples in Canada have a unique status, and while their rich cultures, history, and languages are in themselves unique, I refer here to a unique status based on legal issues such as Indigenous rights and titles, treaties that predate Canada becoming a country in 1867, more recent legal developments in Canadian constitutional provisions in 1982, and Supreme Court of Canada decisions since then. The Canadian government has its own directives concurred with and signed by Assistant Deputy Minister of National Defence and made permanent in 2011 to ensure that, quote, each federal department is responsible for meeting the legal obligation to consult with Aboriginal groups that may arise where a planned activity, construction project, change in use of lands, military exercises, interacts with Canada's framework laws. In such cases, the guidelines state, quote, the Crown has a legal duty to consult and, if appropriate, accommodate when the Crown contemplates conduct that might adversely impact Section 35 rights, established or potential. Of the approximately 11,000 Indigenous peoples in Labrador, there are 2,245 Innu people divided into the communities of Sheshatshiu with 1,305 and Nunatsiavut on the north coast of Labrador with 940. There are approximately 5,100 Inuit people, of which 2,500 live on the northern coast of Labrador and another 2,500 living in the immediate area of Happy Valley Goose Bay, including the communities in Northwest River, some 35 kilometers down the road from us, and another smaller community, Mud Lake, some 12 kilometers across the Churchill River to the southeast. There are approximately 5,000 Métis or mixed Inuit European ancestry people, whose numbers are contained one half here in Happy Valley Goose Bay area and the other one half in the 14 communities on the southeast coast of Labrador. There is an archaeological record indicating that Inuit have occupied Lake Melville, the coast of Labrador, and the lower north shore of Quebec as far west as the present-day community of Mingan for some 8,000 to 9,000 years. Former campsites with fire pits that can be carbon dated and the style of tools left at these sites have allowed archaeologists to make accurate estimates of the dates of occupation of the area. The spear and knife blade shown here, for example, are made from a material called Rama chert that was mined at Rama Bay in northern Labrador and traded before European contact from one Aboriginal group to the other, down as far as Maine in the eastern United States and as far west as the Great Lakes. Inuit populations can be found in the north coast communities of Nain, Hopedale, Postville, Makkovik, and Riglet. Inuit also represent a significant percentage of the population of central Labrador, including the communities of Happy Valley Goose Bay and those close to Goose Bay at Northwest River and Mud Lake. Traditionally, their economy was based on fishing and hunting of marine animals, such as various species of seals, large animals like walrus, and in some cases on whales, giving us information on the degree of organization of these groups and their capabilities. And given the prominence over history of a large caribou herd, the Inuit also depended on the inland caribou herds. After European contact in northern Labrador in the late 1700s, Inuit were encouraged to become attached to European trade goods, metal-edged tools and weapons, for example, that could be obtained for the skins of various fur-bearing animals, like the Arctic fox depicted in this slide, or seals, and for fish products and oils. Currently, the Nunatsiavut government owns the Nunatsiavut group of companies that in turn own real estate, airline and helicopter companies, as well as construction, servicing, and fishing companies. In Inuit communities today, there are challenges with providing adequate housing for dealing with child welfare and public health issues such as tuberculosis. Subsistence hunting and fishing remains an important activity. The Inuit have an impact benefits agreement with Voisey Bay Nickel mine for preferential employment and provision of services. Since 2005 and the inception of the Nunatsiavut government, all Inuit communities have seen an increase in employment due to the government's increased presence in public administration. In terms of the Innu or Indian people of Labrador, the Innu have a documented history of inhabitation of the area going back some 5,000 to 6,000 years. This is a picture of an Innu family from the Quebec North Shore area taken in the early 1900s. You can see the influence of European-based churches and trade in this picture with the lady's cross and the young Innu sweater. Traditionally, the Innu harvested land-based animals, beavers, caribou, bears, rabbits, partridge, and porcupine, etc., in the fall and winter, and harvested fish, birds, and other marine wildlife during spring and summer. This is a slide from a sociologist by the name of Speck, who published his studies in the late 1930s. The map here depicts the territories of bands or family groupings of up to 30 Innu in the Quebec-Labrador area. Key messages to take away from this map is that the Innu occupied large land areas and that it took large land areas to provide the animals and other items required to sustain them for food and shelter. There are 9 Innu communities in the immediate vicinity of the military training area. Most are reserve communities governed under federal government legislation known as the Indian Act. 2 located at Sheshatshiu and Nutwashish are affiliated with the Innu Nation of Labrador and are reserves under the Indian Act as well. In the Innu communities today, there are alcohol and substance and child care issues that the Innu are attempting to deal with constructively. And like the Inuit, they have an impact benefits agreement with the Voisey Bay Nickel Mine that provides for preferential hiring and business opportunities. As part of their land claims, they have an agreement with the province of Newfoundland and Labrador for an impact benefits agreement regarding the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric development. The Innu Economic Development Limited Partnership, owned by the communities of Sheshatshiu and Nutwashish, own a joint venture airline company to serve their own communities and others. Air Borealis is jointly owned by IEDLP, Nunatsiavut Group of Companies, and Provincial Airlines. IEDLP also have a number of joint venture companies that are involved in the development of the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric development and own a percentage of the development as well. Innu Development Limited Partnership also owns a joint deep-sea shrimp vessel with another Canadian company. Subsistence hunting and fishing continues to be an important activity for obtaining food and maintaining cultural identity, ties to the land, and family connections. Regarding the Labrador Métis Inuit, people represented by the Nunatsiavut Community Council, they are products of European, French, English, Scot, and Inuit ancestry. That began with contacts first made in the 1600s and 1700s through coastal and interior fish and fur commercial trading. Depicted here is an Métis Inuit on his trapline in the late 1940s. Here is the area in which Inuit Métis populations would be found in the communities around Happy Valley Goose Bay, including North River and Mud Lake, and in the 14 southeast coast communities from Cartwright in the north to Lanzaclaire in the south. Hunting and fishing continues to remain important as well for maintaining traditional links to the land and family connections. This map depicts the location of modern-day treaties or land claims agreements. The different groups of Indigenous peoples of Labrador and Quebec are at various stages of negotiation with federal and provincial authorities to settle their land claims. These claims must be accounted for in D&D's activities, as the department also has an effect on Indigenous land claims. Here is a map that depicts the land claims that were settled in 2005 that established Nunatsiavut and the Nunatsiavut government representing the Inuit in northern Labrador. To gain access to this territory, D&D is required to request and obtain in writing permission to access the territory. D&D will obtain these permissions for Allied forces as well as any Canadian Forces unit planning operations in the area. Here is a larger scale map showing the Lake Melville area to show you the proximity of Nunatsiavut territory to Five Wing Goose Bay. The provincial government of Newfoundland and Labrador and the Innu Nation signed an agreement on 26 September 2008. The agreement outlines areas that the Innu will have exclusive jurisdiction over, shared jurisdiction areas from which they will share revenue from any developments. Currently, the federal government, provincial government, and the Innu Nation have agreements that require each to consult with each other when approving or considering to approve land use activities and developments. As such, D&D, as a federal government department, respects this agreement and consults with the Innu Nation. Canadian and Allied forces need not be unduly preoccupied with breaching conditions of the agreement, as D&D has procedures in place to ensure Allied and Canadian forces are within the various rules, regulations, and laws that apply. This is a map that depicts the areas that the Newfoundland and Labrador provincial government and the Innu Nation have agreed in principle will be part of the negotiations for comprehensive land claims for the Innu of Labrador. It is depicted here with D&D's military training area, outlined in a green, overlapped to the Innu selected lands. The Southern Inuit are not currently negotiating a land claims agreement. However, we do know, because of Newfoundland Supreme Court cases, that government must consult with the Nunatsiavut Community Council when entering their asserted claim area. There also exists a treaty with the British Crown that Canada has inherited that has obligations to Southern Inuit. And in July 2018, Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada Minister Carolyn Bennett announced an agreement with the Nunatsiavut Community Council by which, quote, discussions will provide an opportunity to address Nunatsiavut's governance as well as its land and resource interests in Labrador, end of quote. This map depicts the area which Nunatsiavut Community Council asserts Indigenous rights and titles to. In summary, in the immediate area of Happy Valley Goose Bay, Mud Lake, North River, and Sheshatshiu, there are significant numbers of Inuit, Southern Inuit, and Innu people. The Innu of Sheshatshiu visit Happy Valley Goose Bay on a daily basis. All groups have extensive land use in Labrador. Five Wing Goose Bay would request that in your training and leisure time that you conduct your activities in a respectful manner that has in the past and will continue to foster good relations with Indigenous and non-Indigenous residents in the area. Thank you for your attention, and this brings to the end the briefing.